October 12, 1972. It was supposed to be a routine flight, a journey of hope and excitement. A chartered plane carried 45 people, a Uruguayan rugby team, their friends and family, from Montevideo to a match in Santiago, Chile. They were young, full of life, heading towards a weekend of sport and camaraderie. But as their plane, a Fairchild FH-227D, ascended into the formidable Andes Mountains, their world was about to change forever. After a stop in Argentina, the flight continued, climbing into a sky thick with clouds that masked the treacherous peaks below. Turbulence shook the cabin, a normal occurrence in this part of the world. But then a fatal error occurred. The co-pilot, believing they had already passed the crucial turning point over Curacao, began the descent towards Santiago. They hadn't. They were still deep within the heart of the mountain range, flying blind. At 3:34 in the afternoon, at an altitude of around 11,500 feet, the unthinkable happened. The plane struck a ridge. The impact was catastrophic. In an instant, the right wing was torn away, followed by the left. The tail section was ripped from the fuselage. What remained of the aircraft became a toboggan of metal and human bodies, hurtling down a steep, icy slope at tremendous speed, before finally coming to rest in a desolate valley, later known as the Glacier of Tears. The silence that followed the screeching metal was pierced by cries of pain and disbelief. Many died instantly in the crash. Those who survived awoke to a scene from a nightmare. They were stranded in one of the most remote and inhospitable places on Earth, an alpine glacier surrounded by towering snow-covered peaks. Temperatures plummeted far below freezing. Their supplies were meager, their injuries severe, and the hope of a swift rescue was their only comfort. But that hope would soon be extinguished. After several agonizing days, they found a small transistor radio. Huddled together, they listened as a voice announced that the official search for their plane had been called off. They were presumed dead. They were utterly, completely alone. The world had given up on them. With this devastating news, the true battle for survival began. Hunger gnawed at their empty stomachs. Frostbite began to claim fingers and toes. The cold was relentless, seeping into their bones. An avalanche thundered down the mountain and buried the fuselage where they sheltered, claiming 13 more lives. Others succumbed to their injuries in the brutal exposure. Death was a constant presence. It was around the 10th day that the remaining survivors, facing certain starvation, made a decision that would haunt and define them for the rest of their lives. One of them later called it the greatest pact they ever made. They agreed that if one of them died, the others could use their body for nourishment. It was a choice born of the most extreme desperation, a moment where the lines of morality were stretched to their absolute limit. They resorted to eating the flesh of their deceased friends and family to stay alive. Survival became an act of sheer will and ingenuity. They built a makeshift shelter from luggage, seat cushions, and twisted pieces of metal. They figured out how to melt snow into drinking water using sunlight and scraps of aluminum. They fashioned sunglasses from the cockpit visors to prevent snow blindness and wrapped themselves in torn seat covers for warmth. It was a testament to human resilience. Rugby players, friends, and strangers, bound together by a shared will to live. They were a small, fragile community, postponing death through invention and solidarity. But they knew they couldn't last forever. Their only hope was to get out. Rescue wasn't coming to them. They had to go to it. On December 12th, almost 2 months after the crash, 3 of the strongest survivors, Nando Parado, Roberto Canessa, and Antonio Vicentin, embarked on an impossible journey. They began to climb westward, towards what they hoped was Chile, with no mountaineering gear, wearing layers of salvaged clothes. They faced a near vertical ascent, climbing a peak that stood almost 15,000 feet high. The air was thin, their bodies emaciated. After 3 days of climbing, they reached the summit, only to be met with a soul-crushing sight. More mountains, stretching as far as the eye could see. It was a moment that could have broken them, but it didn't. Parado, seeing a small valley in the far distance, turned to Canessa and said, "We may be walking to our deaths, but I would rather walk to meet my death than wait for it to come to me." Vicentin returned to the fuselage to conserve their limited food, and Parado and Canessa pressed on. For 9 more grueling days, they trekked through the unforgiving wilderness. driven by the memory of those they had lost and the hope of saving those they had left behind. Finally, on the 10th day of their journey, they stumbled into a remote Chilean valley and saw a man on a horse across a river. They had found civilization. Help had arrived. On December 22nd and 23rd, helicopters guided by Parado roared back into the Andes. The world watched, stunned, as the remaining survivors were pulled from the snow, their bodies skeletal but their spirits unbroken. In the end, of the 45 people who boarded that flight, 16 survived. Their 72-day ordeal was over. The story of Flight 571 became a global symbol of human endurance, of the unyielding power of the will to live against nature's terrifying indifference. But it's also a story of error, a misread instrument, a premature descent, a blind trust in systems that failed. It's a story of how a flight of joy turned into an unimaginable trauma. The survivors returned home forever changed. Their story has been told in books and films. A memorial now stands on the glacier, marking the site as both a grave and a shrine. The memory of those who lived and those who perished continues to resonate decades later. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest tales of survival are born from the deepest tragedies, and that even when the world has given up, hope can be found in the refusal to accept the darkness. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe to our channel.